I see a lot of familiar faces here today, and I'm really, really excited to have such a great showing for the launch of this initiative, which I am very, very excited about. So let's just dive right into it. So here in 2020, we are launching, the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning is launching a professional development series called the Classroom Management Mastery Series. And how we arrived at, this particular professional development opportunity for 2020 is, you're all probably familiar with the CETL sessions that we had hosted for a few years now, actually. We would host a monthly webinar, oftentimes bringing in an outside group to come in and talk, sharing best practices and other things with faculty. And we really, really like that format, and we have such great turnouts, and it's kind of a regular, just kind of go-to that seems to really work. I mean, you can tell by the turnout today, the last Tuesday of the month, later on in the day seems to work well for people. So we were also kind of at, a little bit of a crossroad with deciding what we wanted to do in 2020 with the CETL session series. Who's going to, take that over potentially, and what kind of content would we feature? How are we going to go about that? And at the time, when that opportunity kind of presented itself, I was elbows deep in data from the 2019 Classroom Faculty Experience Survey. So it actually just made a lot of sense, for us to kind of combine the two into one initiative, because we had so much information. We were trying to figure out what faculty wanted to, have professional development on, and then we had this other resource that listed all of those things and all of those areas of opportunity within the classroom. And at the same time, we wanted to be very, very cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of other professional development opportunities out there this year. I mean, there's going to be colloquia offered by Forbes and by CAS throughout the year with very content, specific and teaching specific things. So, it didn't make sense for us to double our efforts with that. But what we did feel was lacking, when we analyzed some of this data in our current situation, is some of that expertise and mastery of the classroom. We could tell from the feedback that people had that they wanted some of that, number one. And number two, there were areas where, we would read comments and we can tell that, there's just, someone would say something about the discussions, for example, and, we would think, oh, there is a way to do that. We wish there was a nice forum for us to really kind of share some of these in-depth, mastery is kind of what we're calling it, of some of the different classroom technology things. And, number one, to, being very, very student-centered and making them the focus of these, but also, as faculty members, so we can be as efficient as possible and get everything that we, can out of the time that we spend in the classroom to be able to make those meaningful connections and have more time for that type of work. And then the other stuff, we can be as efficient as we can. So that's what we're hoping to fill, with this type of series in 2020. And we're really, really excited to launch that, and for you all to be here. So you might have seen on the flyer for this year, we also wanted to not just provide, standalone opportunities for PD. We saw so much success with the instructor presence certification last year that we had ran on the badging opportunity that came along with that we knew we wanted to mirror the efforts, in something like that. But also, like I said, not just have to be a standalone, but offer things throughout the year. And as I wanted to have an in-pen, finalized, agenda throughout the year for every month. But it also doesn't make sense with our, with how we work. There could be changes, that maybe we want to highlight something, that comes to the forefront. So we are mapping out, at least a few months at a time. And we have lots of, tentative agendas for throughout the year. But we did want to highlight just a few of the upcoming sessions we're going to be featuring. So next month we'll be featuring some information on SpeedGrader and Gradebook and Canvas Analytics. And I'll actually be sharing in a little bit, how we inform some of these decisions with the data from the survey that we used. And videos is actually one of the highest ranked things that faculty wanted training on. We really pushed it, kind of hard a couple of years ago after we came to Canvas, but we haven't touched it for a little while. So we're happy to do, a refresher on video and creating videos for your classroom. And then we also just kind of found that there's also a need just for general Canvas, like navigation stuff, that I think could really, really make people's lives easier. So we're going to work through, I know also the timeliness of the gradebook session next month with the upgrades that happened over break is very timely. But we're excited to be able to, like I mentioned, offer these as a series, and then as you are able to attend these throughout the year, you will be able to complete a brief activity afterward. The activities will be a little bit different, kind of varying on the month. Nothing too time intensive for sure. But we will follow up with you too, so you can get that recorded. And then at the end of the year, we will see, everybody who has came to at least 9 out of the 11 sessions. And we will be able to award those folks a badge, very much like the instructor presence one that we had done previously. So we're super, super excited about, launching this today, and, about all of the, coming conversations throughout the year. Yeah, I think that was all on that piece for the time being. So we wanted to outline, at least like a couple of session objectives. The title of this one in particular that we're starting with was, one of the number one requested topics that we had was kind of an Inspire for Faculty Civitas refresher. So we will be focusing a lot of time on Civitas Inspire for Faculty, but also a lot of other options that already exist within the classroom that are along those lines, that are, kind of a student success, tool that we can use in an efficient way to really help promote student success. So we're going to walk through, we wanted to walk through what this year-long program is going to be like. We're going to do a refresher. A lot of it will be a refresher on IFF for a lot of people, for a lot of current users. But we'll also get into some of the in-depth, things that come along with it as well. When I had mentioned, other tools that exist, the context card that recently rolled out, we'll talk a little bit about that, and the message students who, the tool as well. And then Canvas Analytics, which will actually be rolling out here soon. We'll be giving a preview of some of the, classroom related stuff throughout the year. And then we're going to do a little bit of an activity at the end where we're going to, we're going to talk about all these ways that we can use the classroom to do this. But where the rubber kind of hits the road, so to speak, is really how we're writing these interventions and how we're talking to students when we're having these conversations. And even just a little bit of reflection on things like that. After looking through all of this IFF, these fantastic interventions that you have all sent, over the last few years, we have some insights that we really kind of want to share and talk through with you. So without further ado, I wanted to kind of dive into, what I had said was mostly the inspiration for this series in particular, and what helps inform the work that we're doing here. And then also the work that will be happening, as far as classroom enhancements go throughout the year. I'll give a couple previews with that, and just how this data really helps inform that. So last November, you may remember, we sent out a survey link to all faculty regarding their classroom experience, and asking some really, really in-depth questions, honestly, about the different features and what they thought about it. And we were lucky to get almost 200 responses, both of qualitative and quantitative responses. We'll dive into some of this data, which I really, really enjoy talking about. And then, so I had almost made I almost split this into 2 slides because there were just so many features that we really pulled faculty on to see what they thought. And there are, so you can see, the blue bars that go all the way over to the right are the extremely satisfied. And then you can see there are some green ones that kind of reach over further, and that is the I am not familiar or have not used. So for example, you see portfolio and mobile is something that we realize faculty maybe aren't using as much as a lot of other things. Even the Canvas video is something that, there is an opportunity for people that aren't as aware of it as they could be. And then if we look to those blue bars that reach, furthest to the right to see those extremely satisfied, faculty members, by and large, so we were able to, we tried to listen to you as much as we could from the beginning to get instructor names highlighted in discussions, and we were finally able to make that happen last year. And that was by and large the most popular thing that we did. Glad that we were able to implement a change that, was very, very wanted and has clearly made a big impact. It was, you know, not an easy win because it took a long time for the development side to be able to actually figure it out. But once it was a flip, you know, it's just such a nice win for faculty and for students, really. One of the way that I kind of like to put it was like one of the sleepers, I guess, that I, you know, kind of underestimated is the announcements. Canvas, you know, just in and of itself, I think the rich content editor and the announcements in and of themselves are very intuitive and work very well for integrating, you know, even if you're, you know, not a super tech heavy, you know, faculty member, you can get the job done in there pretty easily. And if you want all the bells and whistles, you can do that too. So I think that there's a lot of things like that you know, we were able to kind of see with this survey and some of the results. And then we also, you know, absolutely, you know, acknowledge and pass on the feedback about areas of opportunity. Discussions are another one. You know, we continue to have these discussions about, you know, how can we change up this format? Is it you know, the Canvas discussion itself that, you know, isn't really working, or is it, you know, you know, it's really hard to pinpoint, but we're continuing to look at, you know, other opportunities for that, and quick wins, you know, like the instructor highlight name. So we're keeping that, you know, in mind as we're doing all of this development work. And then, you know, not a lot of other surprises. As in years past, Waypoint continues to be one that we get a lot of feedback on. And I was very appreciative that, you know, so many faculty were so specific with the Waypoint feedback that they provided. Because I think that we're really able to give our partners with Zovio some very specific initiatives that we can work on this year to keep that experience improving for faculty and students. Here's just a quick question that we had asked about faculty, how they felt about their perceptions of classroom support. They felt very supported by FSDAs, which, you know, we felt very you know, happy about. But we definitely realized that there's an opportunity to keep people more up to date, you know, in general with classroom stuff. And that's also why we're here. So. And then we were very happy with the overall faculty satisfaction with the classroom experience. You know, almost 50% of faculty were extremely satisfied with the experience, and you know, right behind that was somewhat, and there were very few people that were not happy at all. So, you know, we think that already we're in a very good place with our classroom, and we you know, we do continue to, when we go to conferences and we see other colleges' classrooms and things like that, there are things that, you know, are very unique to us that we're very lucky to have in a lot of ways. And it's, but we are also, you know, watching this and we want to make it even better. So some of the top training requests that we had, you know, when I kind of filtered through the data and tried to categorize it as much as we could, I was really pleasantly surprised actually that people really want to touch base on video again. So that was, you know, kind of refreshing. Like I said, we had done it a couple years ago. We'll be able to reuse a couple things, but we'll definitely be able to offer some professional development on creating video for your classrooms and having that video presence, which is, you know, such an important thing for our, you know, classrooms of the future. So I'm looking forward to that. Like I said, the gradebook updated very recently over the break, so we're going to do a refresher on that and some of the intricacies that we've kind of seen now that it's been in play for a little bit. Today, we're going to cover Civitas Inspired for Faculty and a couple other classroom features similar to it. Like I said, navigation and in general, people just kind of wanted some of, you know, like even navigating discussions better or tips for keeping organized with things like that. We're going to touch on some things like that. We're going to talk about Waypoint in depth. I think there's a lot of opportunity for, you know, this may be underutilized with Waypoint that I'm really excited to talk about later in the year. And then hand in hand with that, Turnitin and academic integrity. And then, you know, throughout the year, we're also going to, in the spirit of CETL sessions and everything else, we're going to, number one, I want to keep faculty as involved as possible. I want to, you know, feature faculty members and their best practices here as much as we can. And number two, also involving, you know, a lot of the support staff at Ashford that maybe associate faculty members don't get as much, you know, exposure to as a lot of us do. So. And this was maybe the coolest part of the faculty survey to me, was just all of the textual and qualitative responses that people provided about giving specifics how we can improve the classroom. You can see waypoint bright and clear there in the middle, student not shortly behind, and then grade. You can see it was just so nice to be able to see that, and we tried to categorize it and make it as digestible as possible to really see what we could be actionable on in 2020, which brings me to just, I want to do just a quick preview of this. I won't go in too much in depth but for the last few years, since we moved over to Canvas, there have been internal, what we internally kind of, nicknamed Canvas Phase 2, and then 3, and then 4. We've just seen so much growth, in every year with the growth of our classroom and just the adaptations and evolution that we've been able to make is awesome. So we keep doing it every year. This year is Canvas Phase 4. It will be our we've been in Canvas for quite a while now. If we're in the 4th. And if a movie is good and they make 4 of them, it's pretty good, right? I mean, that's how I feel about this. Just a couple super high level highlights of that would be, you probably saw an announcement about Folio. Portfolium is a Canvas tool. So they were actually acquired by Canvas in 2019. It's an online e-portfolio platform for students, typically, but with the changes after they were acquired, they're actually transitioning their name to Folio, and they're actually integrating even in closer with Canvas than they previously had been, which is really cool. It's a win-win for our students. They're able to utilize this portfolio tool, to build a portfolio that they can use when they're looking for jobs. And they'll be able to retain it after graduation, which is fantastic. And the added bonus is that faculty actually can have access to this tool as well, which is pretty cool, I thought. So if you go into your account, in Canvas, if you click on that account up in the upper left corner, you can see the option for Folio. It's already incorporated in a lot of our curriculum, courses incorporated already, but we'll be seeing even more, now that it's a little bit more accessible to all students, we'll be seeing a little bit more of a push with that for this year. So that's exciting. One of the things that we heard, loudest and clearest in the feedback that we looked at was the issue that comes up with the waypoint assignments flagging as being late in the gradebook after they are returned. And hand in hand with that, actually, the fact that students don't get crossed off their to-do list when they do submit assignments in waypoint. So that, as you might know, the waypoint and Canvas just haven't aligned like 100% as perfectly as we wanted to since integration. That the push back to the gradebook works way better than it did previously. But unfortunately, it does make things look just a little bit wonky with the way the Canvas courses are typically set up. So, but and especially actually, the interesting thing is after that gradebook update over break, it became even more evident to students that assignments were being flagged late. So we were able to really, escalate that and put that in the front of the waiting list for enhancements and fixes. So they are currently working on a fix for making sure that it crosses off the to-do list A, and that won't be flagged as late in the gradebook either, which will be, a nice relief to students for sure, and faculty who are fielding those questions. And but we are hoping for keep an eye out for news. I can't make any hard deadline promises for sure, but the fix is in the works for sure and should be here soon. One thing that we're waiting on with that actually is Canvas Analytics. We're going to give a little bit of a preview of that later on, but we're kind of waiting for that waypoint integration to work perfectly with the gradebook to where we make sure that all of that data that faculty have access to is 100% accurate, and we're not having to look at caveats because of waypoints. So we will turn that on after that waypoint fix is in place. And then in general, throughout the year, we were able to really hopefully voice faculty's feedback about waypoint specifically and little pains like running Turnitin integration and things like that. So they will be just kind of doing overall tweaks and tune-ups of waypoint from my understanding throughout the year. And then with the Turnitin integration, how it works, it's going to take a little bit of work, I think, because they have to rethink the integration how it currently is, honestly, to get it automated. But once they can kind of lay the groundwork for it, from my understanding, they can do the automation. I won't promise a deadline on it, but it sounds like it's definitely feasible if they can, kind of lay the groundwork in waypoint throughout the year. So, those are some of the high level things that came directly from the LMS survey that you all provided, in addition to the request for training that is really helping map all of this out. So, and that's why we felt, like we could dedicate a whole series to just things like that. I mean, we have just so many opportunities, that we saw. So thanks again for being here with us. That's kind of the guiding lights that are kind of guiding these throughout the year, in addition to everything else that we have, the waves that we'll be riding, to throughout the year that we'll be focusing on as well. So I did want to today just take some time to do, because it was, a need that was requested by faculty, is just kind of a refresher of IFF and what it looks like and some of that functionality. So one of the interesting things about IFF is you'll see here, just to give a little bit of background, I mean, one of the things that I, am just still astounded by and continue to be astounded by is just the mass of interventions that our faculty have sent to students using Inspire for Faculty. When I checked this morning, and since implementation, there's been 627, 143 outreaches from faculty using Inspire for Faculty. So that number, just still boggles my mind. I can't thank all of you enough for, and you'll see these very, very generous adoption rates too. I mean, we have never, we kind of tried to push a little hard at the beginning when it rolled out, but we've really kind of pumped the brakes and let faculty do their own thing with it over the last year or so. And we still see very, very strong adoption rates. Not only of faculty that like just get in there just to see the engagement and then maybe reach out in another way, but faculty that are using the intervention tool as it's built in. So, and you might notice like the numbers do look a little bit weird. So for 2018, it was actually implemented in June. So it's only a half year of data for 2018. But overall, I mean, since implementation, 62.5% of courses, IFF was at least accessed, and then 54.5 where at least one intervention was sent is awesome. So, I applaud, our faculty for being willing to adopt this tool. And it's interesting because when we had, we kind of thought it had lost a little bit of its luster, and then we went through a little bit of a period where the data wasn't updating right. And we heard from so many people that were like, no, this is a big part of my daily life. I mean, I've integrated this and it's so useful. So we were, we were very, very, continue to be pleasantly surprised with the faculty adoption of it, honestly. And it's right there in every course. In every one of our courses except for SSO, I believe it is offered right there on the left navigation of the classroom. And you'll notice I won't be clicking through a live classroom today. We don't actually have access to a great dummy account of IFF since it is so student data heavy. It's not easy to get a dummy account, kind of in there. So I'll be going through a lot of screenshots by clicking through hopefully a pretty live environment. But I wanted to focus, before we get into IFF too, I wanted to just remind folks that we do have the IFF intervention library located there just on the side of the screen by Civitas. And we have a few, 5 resources out here that I want to highlight for all of you just real quick. If you forget everything that we talk about today, you can go in there and start from scratch. And we have some guides right there at the top. For people that are just getting started out, they give a nice quick overview, just a few pages to where you can quickly get, a nice overview of what it looks like. The second thing that we wanted to make sure that faculty had really, really easy access to is links to resources. We didn't want to tell faculty like, hey, here's this thing where you can send, students to resources or to tutoring or to library or to writing center. But you got to go find the link and you got to do that part on your own. We wanted to make sure we had all that stuff right there as close as possible. So faculty had examples there of like, oh, I can, send them to Grammarly, or I can send them to, my, through the CHAMPS peer mentoring, if a student is, struggling a little bit. So we wanted to have those links right there that faculty could point to with easy access. And then in addition to that, we offered, links out to our tutoring resources. We thought that this was a really nice area to be able to kind of house information on whether a faculty member's course offers tutoring, which kind of tutoring it offers. And then further on down the page, we were also able to work with the Originality Matters Task Force in the last year and get some resources on academic integrity housed there, which are very, very useful in some of those situations that come up. And then, one of the items at the bottom that, we put a lot of love and blood and sweat and tears into, which I think, has benefited, some situations, is the template library. So, and we have seen people using it. I was actually very pleasantly surprised that people were using them and actually like tweaking them and making them their own. And it was actually working well. But what we did is we went through and gave some examples of, what an intervention can look like, that you're writing to a student if you want to refer them to tutoring, or if you want to, maybe if they're not great about participating in discussion boards. We wanted to just provide examples, not for faculty to just outright copy and paste and use, but to use as guides, to use as examples, to give them starting points. So we have seen, some usage of that, and that's so we really did, kind of front load faculty with a lot of resources, with IFF. But I think that one of the beautiful parts of it, at least in my mind, is that we have kind of just given faculty free rein with it as well. It's like, here are all these things, do with it what you will. And we've seen some really cool instances of success. And I don't believe I mentioned earlier, we'll actually have Dr. Alan Belzer here in a little bit from the Center for First Year Experience to talk about some of those successes. He was actually able to do a review of some of the Inspire for Faculty data that we have acquired since implementation. So he's going to stop by in a little bit to share some of that story and how it really is making a difference, and what that kind of looks like. So when you do go to access the actual Inspire for Faculty tool, you will be sent to a landing page that looks a little bit like this. One of the first things you'll want to keep in mind, and it's been pretty consistent for the most part, we did have a gap in data over break, a little bit before and a little bit after break. But up in that upper right corner where you see that one, you'll see the last date of the multi-sync of the data. And that was when the data was last refreshed. And one of the things to keep in mind about Inspire for Faculty too is there is about a 48-hour delay on data. And that is some of the feedback that we have heard from faculty is, and it's true, that 48 hours is a lot of time in our quick classes. I mean, a student can get in and caught up pretty quick if something is indicating that they're falling behind, but then they get in and get caught up, and it's just a couple days later. So that is something to keep an eye out for. It is a great indicator of engagement and the grades overall, but that 48-hour refresh, it's pretty quick, but a lot can happen in 48 hours. And our faculty have highlighted that for us too. The second part you'll only have to keep in mind if you teach multiple classes that are going on at the same time, that are on different start dates. So when you log in, when you click on IFF, you should just see your class that shows up. But if you have classes on multiple start dates, you'll have to use that little toggle to go to the other start date of your other course. So just keep that in mind if you're working through multiple courses. And then over there on the right-hand side, you can see how the engagement level in your course adds up to other courses of the same kind that are running, which is a cool statistic to. It's interesting. I don't think that it can necessarily be. Maybe it could, a level of like faculty influence or anything like that. I do feel like, I don't know that it'd be interesting to see if there's correlation between, super engaged faculty and this, engagement score. I've seen, I've had classes where it's a little high. I've had classes where it's a little low. I'm also entry point faculty member, so that might differ a little bit too. It just kind of depends, but it's an interesting, factor to consider. So once you get into your course, this is really where, I think IFF is super, super valuable, is in this engagement overview. It is able to summarize hundreds of classroom data points and give a heat map of where your classroom is in levels of engagement. There where you see the red and the orange and the yellow and the green, that is your map of students and how they line up with engagement. At the bottom, IFF does actually have a couple recommended outreaches that they do sometimes. If you haven't reached out to a student with low engagement, for example, they have a couple things suggested there, or if a student hasn't been reached out to for a while. And then up there in the right-hand corner, you can see there's a couple different toggles. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of toggle your view in here. This initial one where you get in, it really breaks it down by engagement mostly. But if you sort it by grade, it actually shows you where students are ranked by grade as opposed to engagement, which is interesting. You see sometimes a student, like in this example, a student who is red, not high engagement, but who is doing very well grade-wise. or you'll see, sometimes a student who's very engaged, who's like maybe not doing so hot grade wise. So it really is a cool indicator. When you get in and start to sort out the data, you can tell a lot of stories just by looking at this. And I was going to show a screenshot of, clicking on a student. If you click on any of these bubbles, which is representative of a student, it'll give you a quick overview of their information. And then I realized I would have to block out the whole thing. So it was kind of a silly point to actually take a shot of that. If you go up to the top there, you can sort by student list instead, which is another, and in my opinion, maybe one of the most useful views, in order to get your outreach kind of going. There at the top, you can sort by engagement score. So say you want to send an email to your very low and low students and offer them tutoring support. You can filter by them super quick up there at the top and then send them a message. Down at the bottom, you can actually take the data kind of into your own hands a little bit more. You can sort by some of the other factors like like their grade, for example, their engagement score. That's what it automatically sorts by. So there's really a lot of ways that you as a faculty member can customize. And then once you actually click on a student and go into their specific file, there's a lot of digging you can really do. At the top there, you see they kind of summarize the engagement and where that student lies. How it's changed recently, where they are compared to this student is actually like number 1 in discussion board activity. You can see some really useful insights there. And number 2 down at the bottom, down in the trend lines where you can kind of analyze where they are compared to the class. So some really cool stuff there. Number 3 is actually some of the most useful stuff, information that Inspired for Faculty provides us is some of the unique student demographics we see there. We can see the student major. We can see actually their email. We can send an email from right there. We can see their phone number, which we don't have access to at any other place in our LMS easily. So there's really a lot of useful stuff that we can see right there. And then the last piece that's super useful that we don't have another good access point for at this point, other than the FSC report, is the advisor contact information. So once a faculty member does decide to, send an intervention through Inspire for Faculty, they will see a tool that pops up that looks like just about any other email tool you would use. Up at the top, you see a subject line, and that's actually a really interesting thing that we saw when we dug into some of these interventions. I was surprised at how many, and maybe faculty might not have realized it, but there were so many that were sent without a subject line. Where if I received an email without a subject line, I would kind of wonder. I don't know if I would be privy to open it or not. I would question it, before I would for sure, as opposed to a meaningful subject line that might grab my attention in a helpful way. Number 2, one of the cool things that IFF does is, if you're familiar with mail merge, you're actually able to send multiple messages to a list of students, and it'll insert their first name, as if you had sent out 3 separate emails with their name first there. So that's a really cool option that offers. And then at the bottom, you can see that there are a couple of options for copying. You usually want to copy yourself on the email. One of the other drawbacks that we've heard, from faculty, which makes a lot of sense, is there's not an awesome way to see archived emails or like exactly what you have sent. Unless you send the copy to yourself in your own email, you'll get copied on it. So that's something to keep in mind with that. And then at the bottom, we're able to actually copy a student's advisor right on that email, which in my mind has been one of the biggest catalysts of change, with the implementation of IFF is, kind of breaking down those walls between faculty and advisors. And I've seen some really great instances of that happening and helping students out of jams. That's been really cool that we might not have seen otherwise. So that's definitely but it is also worth noting, if you're sending weekly updates to your, students using this interface, maybe don't include the advisors on everything. Maybe only if it's, something dire where a student is, missing out of class, or maybe an academic integrity issue, something like that. Keep in mind for when you're copying those folks in. So, we talked a lot about where we've come from, where we've come with it, what it looks like for, a little bit of a refresher, but I wanted to invite Dr. Alan Belcher here today because we've had, him and I and Dr. Margie Esteveld too have had so many conversations about this platform and the research that him and Margie did, at the end of 2019. So it's like, we've seen all of this work, but like, so what's it mean? Like, what have we seen? And Alan is probably our expert, on what that looks like at this point, and kind of what that looks like throughout the industry. So I want to turn things over to him for a little bit and let him talk about his research and insights.
Thanks, Cole. If you can back up one slide there, please, to that previous one. Let me start right there. The numbers that Cole showed just a few minutes ago about the number of nudges, interventions that we as a faculty have put out through IFF is a fantastic number. But as Cole mentioned too, we kick around all the time. What does it really mean? So I checked with my first line intellectual bodyguard, Margie Esteville, about her thoughts about all this. And we came to the conclusion that we wanted to know not only might Inspire for Faculty help us keep students engaged and in class, but might it also help students perform better? So we wanted to know if we compared pre and post implementation of IFF. So we gathered data on student performance from 2018 for 3 months in January, February, March 2018, and for the same 3-month period in 2019. And we took every student, every course, every section for those 3 months and took the student performance data from the assignments. In each of those categories then, we wanted to identify what we considered as at-risk students, which was anyone with less than a C at the end of week 2 of a course, and then find out, did they persist and finish the course? If so, how did their grade turn out? And was there an IFF intervention specific to them in 2019 that didn't occur in 2018? So we, along with that, then we also collected the level of use of all of our faculty, full-time and associate, on how much they were using Inspire for Faculty. So that's the data we collected. And Cole, thank you. So here's some basic numbers that we saw. First of all, in 2018, 77,000 some student enrollments in those first 3 months across all courses, okay? Compare that to 2019, a smaller number. We obviously enrolled fewer students in that same 3-month period, but notice then the number of students that we defined as at risk, the number of students that dropped, or the percentage of students that dropped, and then 3.5% who were at risk and withdrew from the course for one reason or another. So that didn't seem like a very big number to us. And in fact, in 2019, the percentages were a little bit higher. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that might be. We know that some of our courses increase the rigor. We know that, we might just have had a different group of students coming in. There's all sorts of variables that we were not able to control for. But that's the basic numbers that we saw from all of the student performance data. So if we can go to the next slide. Now, we broke that down also by college, just to see if there was anything that jumped out at us. So I'm going to pick on College of Education because that's where I was last year. 6.78% of our students were considered to be at risk, and they dropped. We had 3.7 IFF logins by the faculty member per class, whether it was a 5-week or a 6-week class. We didn't differentiate that, but that's how many times, on average, faculty logged into a class. The average class size is listed there. But here's some interesting numbers. The average number of outreaches, so education, for instance, just over 28 messages through IFF were sent out per class, per section, with just 1.5 outreaches on average per student. And you can see all of the averages down there. Now, what I will tell you right now, we're going to move on to some other data. The averages per student don't mean a thing, as we eventually found out. So, next slide. We also wanted to look at the level of use by faculty. So we eventually identified them as basically non-users. This is faculty who either didn't log in, or they may have logged in but didn't send any messages out. Light users, medium users, high-end users, and just the number of times they logged in and the number of outreach messages that they sent. If you look, for instance, in the high user row, the number of outreaches, 147 outreaches per class. That's a lot. Of course, if you have 30 students in a class, maybe that's not so bad. But when you look at 7.687 outreaches per student, that means each student in that class was getting that many contacts just through Inspire for Faculty. That does not include other emails or other message media, but just through IFF. We thought that's a pretty big number. And then if we can move on. Now, here's what we found out, and it's a mixed bag, really. We did know that we found some pockets of places where there was some positive benefit of the use of IFF. You had to identify the type of faculty, which is full-time versus associate, doctorate versus not doctorate, number of courses taught at a time, so all different kinds of things about the type of faculty, coupled with their level of use, were they high, medium, low users, and it also depended on the college. But mostly what we found was that a light to medium use of IFF, that is a judicious use of the tool, what turned out to be about the best way, had the best impact on student performance. Not necessarily on student completion, but on their performance based on the rubrics at a waypoint. Now, we also discovered that doing a cursory examination of the actual content of the messages that were sent, that it was much more important to send the individual messages rather than the mass emails, and people did that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but knowing that that is not originally what the tool was intended for, but it's also not the, hey, you did a great job on this assignment, Joe, I'm glad that you did it, that sort of thing. Or I really need you to work with me on this next assignment. The individual targeted specific messages appear to have a much stronger impact than the mass emails. So those are the kinds of things that we found. We know that if we could take the time to read 600,000 emails, we might actually find a lot of detail in terms of how best to message those things to students. But obviously, we're not going to be able to do that. Even with Cole's help, we just decided that wasn't going to fly. In addition to that, we did get some data direct from the IFF people that pretty much matched what we had to say. It really depends on the message. So with that, that's a little bit about our research from last year.
Thank you so much. That is so insightful. Even every time I've heard actually a few times, but every time I always catch something a little bit new, which is exciting to me. But I did want to ask you specifically to share just a little bit, because when you see something like this, in my mind too, it's like we sent so many interventions. How is this not moving the needle? Like how have we not moved intervention retention up by so many percentage points? But is this kind of typical to what other people are seeing across the industry, or what are you seeing with other institutions and with the research you're doing of other examples of stuff like this? What is it kind of on par with other people, or what's that look like?
Yeah, those are great things that would be in a follow-up study, along with some of the questions here that are coming up in the chat. Cost benefit analysis. No, we weren't able to do that because we really don't know how much we were spending for that. Did we see any results that suggested what week bears the best results? No, we didn't look at that. We have data that probably could be analyzed that way, but no, we didn't. We did not look for that. So I think there's all sorts of things that we could go, different routes we could follow. We're rather confident, though, that it is the tone and the content of the message that bears the best results.
And really that less is more. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And really with, exactly like you had said, with the data that Civitas had shared with some other universities that they had done studies with, that was very much the result, as well as tone was very much, a factor, and that saturation point too. If you send a weekly, email to everybody through it, it's easy to miss those really, really important ones that come through, as opposed to if you get one really important one throughout a class. But yeah, and everything that I've seen too, when I've gone to conferences too, I don't feel like we're that off par with other people. I mean, other people are seeing the exact same thing. Like, we're all trying these things, and it's like, you see wins, you see sometimes no impact, sometimes you see negative impact. And it's really, especially with our, industry and our university, with as many variables as there are, it's so hard to have a level, of anything to really keep a level measure. So, yeah, well, thank you so much for your time today, Alan. I really, really appreciate you sharing those insights with us. So I want to kind of open the conversation up to the chat, maybe just take a couple minutes to talk about, we've talked about setting interventions through IFF. So what is there one thing that you do in your class, maybe one nudge that you really find that works well with your students? Maybe you send something during the first week to people that aren't doing so hot. Maybe it's an Inspire for Faculty, maybe it's through a different medium. But I do want to just have people share quickly in the chat, maybe what are some of the unique ways that you reach out to your students, to support, maybe some of the people that are lower engagement, maybe some that are higher engagement. For example, I shared this image because it reminded me of like a quick and easy one that I like to send to my class, like after the first week or so. I like to give it just like a little bit of personality. You can't give memes too much personality or you're going to miss a whole audience. But Bill Murray is pretty universal. And that was just a quick and easy one I like to use to send to my students that were just really nailing it. And it's funny too, because sometimes you hear back and sometimes you hear nothing. And then, sometimes you hear back from a student that says, hey, that was really what I needed this week. Just a little something to acknowledge my work. Thanks. So I'm seeing in the chat, a couple folks had mentioned copying the advisor has been a huge win with IFF. That's opened so many different channels of communication with advisors so they can follow up on their end. It's fantastic. Yeah, it looks like Beverly waits until about week 3. It does take, that's another thing to consider with Inspire for Faculty, is right off the bat, within the first couple of days of the course, it takes a little while for the data to be more meaningful. So it does sometimes make sense to wait, until at least a weekend to kind of really dive into that. Yeah, humor. Yeah, it's so hard to you never know if humor lands in an online format. But otherwise, yeah, you do want to try to make yourself human, and but it's a hard line to walk. You also don't want to have to put a winky face after every time you use sarcasm so people get it. That's it's a hard line to walk. Oh, an email on Mondays reminding you just going to respond to discussions. Holly, that's great. I love that one. Mark sends an email out to students about engagement and what that means. Yeah, and about how it is an indicator for their success. That's awesome. We're gonna have to take all of this chat and do something with it, because I love the conversation. The interventions and the praise work well for Joan. That's great. Crickets. Oh, I love that. Yeah, somebody uses the subject line crickets, when people are maybe missing out of the class. That's great. It's important to, yeah, when you have a student that, is maybe going through a rough situation, you want to reach out and be human and like offer your support more so than, remind them about the requirement and your late policy. It's like, hey, is everything okay? What can I do to help? And humor, yeah, is perfect. That's great. Oh, thanks for some good examples. So in the spirit of Inspire for Faculty, Inspire for Faculty is a really, really insightful tool, and it's great. But it's not the only tool that exists, within our classrooms to really leverage to where we can help support student success, honestly. And we're going to see more and more of these incorporated in the classroom throughout the year. But I want to highlight just a couple of them quickly. The context card was recently turned on in the gradebook. Anytime you click on a student's name in the gradebook, you're able to actually see this context card pop up over in the right-hand side of the classroom, which is like in its own way, kind of like a mini Inspire for Faculty. Up at the top, you can actually click that envelope and send them a message in the Canvas inbox. Down lower, you can actually see what I think is some of the most useful data is their last login date. That's a huge one that we don't really have good access to otherwise at this point. So that's a nice data point there to see. You can also link out to their grades and the analytics as it exists currently in the classroom. One thing to keep in mind, like I had mentioned before, is that the caveat for those is the waypoint assignment. So if it looks like maybe a student has a late assignment, but they definitely don't, that's probably the late assignments and how that's working or not working right now. So, and that's partially why we wanted to wait to turn that analytics on until that was fixed. So we wanted to make sure that all that data looks nice and clean and crisp and accurate. But keep that in mind until we get that fixed in place, as the waypoint assignments won't be reflected correctly on the context cards. But then they actually have a nice little overview of the last 10 graded items, and then that student's participation and page views in the classroom. So it's a nice, just a nice little thing to double check. If you see a student in the gradebook who might not be doing so well, you can pop that up and have a really quick, nice insight into what things are looking like. One of the other things that goes hand in hand with that while you're in the gradebook, and this is one of my favorite features personally about the Canvas gradebook, is the message students who function. If you haven't used this yet, get in and toy with it a little bit. So any assignment that exists, particularly the discussion assignments, if you click on the three dots there in the gradebook, it will pop up a menu where it says message students who, and it'll pop up basically what looks like an email message, but it'll be a Canvas inbox message to all of the students who meet a certain criteria. So you can send a message to, like this example says, all students who haven't submitted yet. There's one that says, all students that scored higher than something on an assignment, or those that scored lower on an assignment. And then the other option is those who haven't had their grades submitted yet. But haven't submitted yet one is the one that I use probably the most frequently. And that one works really, really well with the discussion boards. For example, if you go into, like your first discussion board of the year or of your course and, want to send a quick message to those who haven't submitted yet, you can do it within like 3 clicks. You can send a quick message to them. It automatically populates the subject line. That's a really, really quick and easy way to, follow up with students that haven't submitted their assignments that you want to follow up with. And then, so coming soon, we're going to have, as soon as that waypoint fix goes into place, we're going to turn on what's called Canvas Analytics, which if you think about how IFF gives you a heat map and kind of a dashboard of these things at a very high level and kind of makes some of those decisions for you. Canvas Analytics kind of gives you a little bit more of the power to dive into the data yourself and make some of those choices. So like, for example, you can see down at the bottom, you'll be able to filter by last participation and last page view. You'll be able to look at on-time assignments. And the really, I think the biggest win with the Canvas Analytics feature will be that the data refresh is just basically instantaneous because it's a native Canvas tool. It's built right in the classroom. There's never going to be a delay on the push. So we're really looking forward to being able to turn on some of those analytical features for faculty. And we will be featuring that in one of our upcoming Classroom Management Mastery series sessions. So I wanted to take, just a few minutes here at the end, and we actually have just the perfect amount of time for it, to just give us a little bit of a chance to reflect. So we talked a lot about today, the different tools, and I think that the Mastery series in essence will focus much on the how, the functionality, the efficiency, things like that. But we do want to kind of come back to the why and the how sometimes. So bear with me and kind of participate a little bit in this activity. And you don't have to post it in the chat. You can you're certainly welcome to if you'd like to. But either number one, you can write a message for a scenario that you have in mind for a course that you teach. Maybe you want to follow up with students before they submit their final paper. To submit it to paper review, or maybe you want to refer a couple students to tutoring like halfway through the class because that's a crucial time. Think about something specific in your class, or if you don't want to think of a specific situation, think about the one that I was talking about earlier, where a student, you're in the first week of your class, a student is not participated in their first discussion or group of students. Just draft a super quick email or message to them. What would that look like? It doesn't have to be, crazy complicated, but just take maybe 30 seconds, a minute to kind of either on a Word document or wherever you'd like to. Maybe you have one that exists already. Maybe you have one, on a Post-it note saved on your desktop that you're going to send this week. Just take it and just kind of look at it for a little bit. I'll give you a couple minutes to just kind of take some time to do that. You can imagine the Jeopardy theme playing as we wait. All right, we'll give it just another couple of minutes. I can see Karen shared one there about sending a friendly reminder about the discussion. I recall from your introductory posts. Oh, I love that. Okay, I think that was about enough time. And if you're still working on it, that's perfectly fine too. The one that Karen posted was awesome. I love that. Hi there. I'm sending along a friendly reminder that your discussion post is past due. I recall from your introductory post that. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I look forward to hearing from you. I love the tone and the positive attitude. And I love even if you know there's not probably a lot you can do to help, it's probably more of a personal situation. Offering that means a lot. And I love to refer back to the introductory posts, to my students to refer to their career goals and everything like that. That's fantastic. Yes, William mentioned one about turning into Turnitin before the final paper. That's a fantastic reminder. Yes, especially if you're in a class where that tends to be an issue that comes up. And yeah, use those. That's why we want to empower our faculty, because they know the classes they teach, they know the content, and they know when these types of interventions will be most appropriate. So if you have just a few really, really meaningful ones throughout the class, really take advantage of those. Yeah, some of the language, let me know if I can help in any way. These are great. So I want to just, pose just a couple quick questions, to folks, keeping in mind, and I guess I purposely, maybe not so purposely, but, gave you just a little bit of time to write one. Really think about how long your message is. If you can't get a quick intervention out within a few sentences, like a shortish paragraph, you might want to, brevity is a good thing with interventions like this. Do you address a student by name? I mean, there's a tool within IFF that lets it do it for you. There's no reason that you can't at least, quickly address them by name. What does your tone sound like? How would you feel if you were stressed out or in a crazy situation and got an email like that, on top of everything else they had going on? Take a step back and look at that. I like to use the Grammarly tool. I don't know if other faculty members do, but it has a tone analyzer there that's like, it's not, I don't take it for gospel, but it is kind of fun to keep in mind when I'm writing discussions. How do you sign off? Do you sign off with anything, with your name, with your contact information? A subject line, we talked about that. That's a quick and easy win. A lot of people don't think about it in a rush, but that's the way to grab attention. And is there a call to action? Are you linking them out to something? Or there are very supportive, interventions that are just saying, hey, what can I do to help? And those are very, very effective. So I didn't get a chance to incorporate as many. I do want to send out the slide deck because I want to give a shout out to Stephanie Adams, because she helped do a lot of the legwork for getting this presentation together today and got a lot of great resources together on interventions and nudging and what it means to write a good email. But we weren't able to dive as in-depth as I wanted to. So there's some articles here for further reading that I'll make sure we can share the deck out and get some folks. We have some stuff both from our library and some non-scholarly articles. So, and we just wanted to thank you. I don't know if I could have timed that any more perfectly. That takes us to the end of the hour. Well, we will be sending out, Steph, if you could please post the link to the evaluation in the chat for those that are still on. And we'll send it out to other folks as well that had to hop off, and with the recording as well. We do ask that you fill out just a super quick, just a couple quick questions about what you saw today. And then we can make sure that you're eligible for that badging opportunity that'll happen at the end of the year. So thanks everybody for an awesome first session. I really, really appreciate all of your participation and thoughts, both tonight and moving forward. And I look forward to the rest of the series. Thanks.